God bless you, friend. Once again, this is Evangelist Theophilus. You see, the Lord wants me to bring a message to you, which I believe that if you obey this word, it will change and transform everything about your life. You see, God woke me up this morning and wanted me to tell you to obey that calling in your life. To do what? To obey that calling in your life. This morning, 5 a.m., God woke me up and asked me to tell you to obey that calling in your life. Korea Satoriama. You see, many children of God today are living in disobedience. You know very well that God has called you into the ministry. You know very well that God has called you to do one thing or the other for Him. And you know very well, but you have been living in disobedience. You are not obeying that calling in your life. You have been called into the ministry and you keep wasting time. You keep going round and round and you are living in disobedience. This morning, God woke me up and asked me to tell you to begin to obey that calling in your life. You have wasted too much time. You have wasted too many years. You have wasted too many days delaying and disobeying God in fulfilling that calling in your life. This message the Lord asked me to bring to you is not for everybody, but this message is for those that have been called into the ministry. I know there is a calling in your life. I know God has called you into one area of ministry or the other. You see, I know God has given to you an assignment. That is what you ought to be doing right now. You see, if God has called you into the ministry, that is what you ought to be doing. You see, the Lord said to me this morning that many children of God are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. There is a calling in your life, and that is what you are supposed to be doing as a child of God. You see, God is saying to you, God has called some of us into the ministry. Instead of obeying the callings of God in our lives, we have decided to go our own way. We have decided to do our own things. We have decided to follow our own ways. You see, if God didn't call you to be a nurse, you are not supposed to be a nurse. If God did not call you to be a pilot, you are not supposed to be a pilot. If God did not call you to be a musician, you are not supposed to be a musician. If God did not call you to be a pastor, you are not supposed to be a pastor. If God did not call you to be a businessman, you are not supposed to be a businessman. You see, you are supposed to do what God has called you to do. You see, God has called so many of us into the ministry, but we are trying to figure it all out before we begin to obey God. We are trying to get everything in place before we begin to obey God. You see, with God, it does not work like that. If God has called you into the ministry, all you need is faith. You don't need any other person. You need faith. You need God and your faith to step out. When you step out, God will bring the people that will help you. When you step out in faith, God will bring the resources. When you step out in faith, God will help you. But when you just sit down and begin to figure it all out, or you begin to say to yourself, oh, where will I have the resources? Where will I have the people to help me? Where will I have this? Where will I have that? Nothing will happen, and the devil will continue to rejoice because you are living in disobedience. Friend, that is why God is bringing this message to you. Will you obey God? Will you obey that calling in your life? You have been called into the ministry. You have been called to do one thing or the other for God. This is the moment. God has asked me to tell you that you need to be doing what He has called you to do. When you begin to do what God has asked you to do, the blessings you are looking for will come. You see, we cannot know true peace. We cannot know true joy. We cannot know true happiness until when we are doing the will of God. That will of God in your life. That will of God in your life. That assignment that God has called you into. There are so many Christians. There are so many believers who are in the wrong job today. Who are doing the wrong thing callings today, and God wants you to begin to obey that calling in your life. Roba Shaka. God wants you to begin to obey that calling in your life. You see, you have wasted too much time doing what you want to do, not what God wants you to do. This is the moment that you must begin to do that which God wants you to do, and not what somebody wants you to do. You see, if you don't do what God is asking you to do, you cannot know true peace. You cannot know true joy. The true joy will only come when you're obeying God and fulfilling your ministry. You may marry the wife of your dream. You may be doing, you see, you may have millions of dollars in the bank. You may be rich, but if you are not obeying God, you will not know true peace. God wants you. He asked me to tell you that you ought to be doing what He has called you to do. If you have been called into the ministry, that is where your prosperity will come. That is where your breakthroughs will come. That is where you will know true joy and true peace. And maybe God has sent you into one nation, one village, one city, or somebody. You need to obey that assignment. Until then, we will not know true peace. So, child of God, this is what God is saying. This is what He woke me up this morning to let you know, that this is the moment to begin to obey that calling in your life, to begin to fulfill that ministry in your life. Don't ask questions. Don't ask questions. Just step out in faith and begin to obey God, and you will see that God will never disappoint you. God bless you. Once again, this is Evangelist Theophilus saying, you were born to win, and it is time to obey that calling in your life. God bless you.